The first thing she noticed was the hands. Not the torn sleeve. Not the matted hair. Not even the bare feet leaving wet prints across the porch boards in the middle of a Montana blizzard. The hands. The way they curled around nothing. Fingers already shaped for a bowl that wasn't there yet. Rain doesn't fall up here above Blackwater Ridge. It attacks. It comes sideways off the pine line and slams against the cabin glass hard enough to make you wonder, every single winter, whether the windows will hold. Nora Hale had lived through 11 of these storms. She knew the sound of each one. This one sounded different. She steadied the spoon near the little girl's mouth. Slow down. The child ignored her. Steam curled around pale cheeks streaked with road dirt as she dragged the spoon from Nora's hand and swallowed too fast, then coughed halfway through it. Her fingers clamped around the wooden bowl with both hands. White-knuckled, like somebody might rip it away mid-bite. Because somebody had. Before. Nora shifted closer on the stool. Hey. Easy. The girl's eyes flicked toward the window. Not at the storm. Into it. Like she was listening for something buried inside the wind. The cabin sits alone at the top of the logging road where the switchback bends toward the tree line. No neighbors. No cell signal worth depending on. Most winters Nora liked it that way. Tonight the walls felt thin. She reached carefully toward the edge of the girl's sleeve, the torn one hanging nearly to the shoulder, and the child recoiled so fast that stew splashed across the floorboards in a dark arc. Then the knock came. Not loud. Just certain. 3 times. Slow enough to mean something. The girl stopped breathing. Nora was on her feet before she realized she'd moved. A second knock followed the first. Slower. The old cabin groaned beneath it. The girl slid off the stool and pressed herself behind Nora's legs without making a sound. That was the part that stayed with Nora afterward. Not the knock. Not the storm. The silence the child chose. Nadia. A man's voice. Deep. Controlled. Right on the other side of the door. Close enough that he already knew she was inside. Nora's hand tightened around the dish towel on her shoulder. The shotgun beside the fireplace felt 1,000 miles away. Then the latch turned. The door opened against the wind, which meant he was strong enough not to fight it. Cold arrived first. Then the man. Tall. Broad enough to fill the frame, without trying. Dark shearling coat glazed with sleet, water streaming off black leather gloves onto the floorboards. Snow still clinging to his boots like he'd walked a long way through it. His eyes went to Nadia immediately. Everything else in the room disappeared for him. Nadia. The child pressed harder into the back of Nora's legs. No. One word. Barely a sound. But absolute. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him without ever looking away from her. A silver crest caught the firelight at his belt. Wolf's head. Old metal. Worn smooth in the way things get worn when hands reach for them often. Nora put herself between them. She was freezing. His eyes shifted to Nora for the first time. Gray. Bloodshot. Not angry. Something worse than angry, restrained. Like a man who had been awake for days, holding something down by force. You need to move. She was alone on the road. She should not have been. And there it was, underneath the control, underneath the authority, a crack. Not rage. Something closer to a man who had been terrified for longer than he could admit, and didn't know what to do with it now that she was safe. Nora felt Nadia's fist close around a handful of her sweater. Tiny fingers. Shaking. Please don't let him take me. The man closed his eyes. Just once. Just for a second. Snow melted off his coat in thin streams across the floor while the fire cracked behind Nora's shoulder. He looked older standing still than he had entering the room. Mid-30s, maybe. But the kind of mid-30s that has lived through more than the number counts for. Nadia. His voice had dropped. Come here. She doesn't want to go, Nora said. That is not your decision. Too fast. Too smooth. The answer of someone who has never had that challenged. Nora felt Nadia press harder into the back of her legs. He noticed. A muscle moved once along his jaw before he stripped off one glove and shoved wet fingers back through dark hair. That's when she saw his knuckles. Split. Swollen. Not old injuries. Recent. Like tonight recent. You found her where? He asked. Miller's Bend. Lower Road. Yes. His attention moved to the frost-covered windows. She watched him calculate something, distance, time, who might have seen, and whatever expression he had walked in wearing went somewhere unreachable. Something colder replaced it. He crossed toward Nadia. Nora stepped sideways. Blocked him. The movement stopped him short like she'd hit him. For a moment neither of them moved, and the only thing breathing in the room was the storm. You feed strangers often? He asked quietly. She looked hungry. That usually stops mattering once people learn who she belongs to. The sentence sat there between them. Wrong. Not because of the words exactly. Because of what happened to Nadia when he said them. The way she curled tighter against Nora's back. The way her lips went white. Like she'd heard a version of that sentence before and already knew what came after it. Nora looked down at her. Then back at him. Who are you? He studied her for another second. Lucien Voss. The name did what names like that always do in small mountain towns. It landed. Even up here above Greyhaven, people lowered their voices around that family. Timber contracts going back 3 generations. Mountain land nobody could quite trace the ownership of. Private security that showed up on properties before the county did. Old money. The kind that had roots deep enough to choke everything growing around it. Nora felt Nadia flinch at the sound of his name. Lucien noticed. The cabin went quiet. Just rain against the chimney stones and fire eating at dry wood. Then Lucien looked toward the dark windows one more time, and when he spoke again, the control in his voice had a seam running through it. You should pray nobody followed me here. Nora's stomach tightened. What does that mean? He kept staring at the snow swallowing the logging road. If the pass closes before morning, he said, the people looking for Nadia won't stop at your door politely. The silence after that was a different kind of silence. Nadia's fingers dug harder into Nora's sweater. Don't tell them I'm here. Lucien turned sharply. There's nobody to tell if we leave now. No. The word burst out of Nadia fast enough to splinter the room. She backed toward the fireplace, blanket tangling around her legs, and the fear that moved across her face then wasn't the fear of a child scared of a stranger. It was recognition. Nora had worked enough crisis cases to know the difference. Children scared of strangers looked confused. They cried. They reached for adults. Nadia watched doors, windows, hands, like she had already been shown, more than once, what adults could do once they decided she belonged somewhere else. The cabin groaned under another blast of wind. Lucien checked his phone. Cracked screen. No signal. His jaw tightened. The pass closes completely if the temperature drops 3 more degrees. How do you know that? I drove through the lower ridge an hour ago. An hour. Nora looked toward the window. The nearest plow route was 20 miles south. Nobody came up the mountain in weather like this. Unless they had a reason. You said they'd keep me there, Nadia whispered. Lucien looked at her. Then away. You promised. And there, in the negative space between his silence and her words, Nora heard the whole architecture of it. Not a random runaway. Not a custody dispute. A child arguing from memory. From something already decided and broken. You're sending her where? Nora asked. Lucien dragged a hand across his face. Water ran from his sleeve. It isn't that simple. That isn't an answer. His eyes snapped toward her, and for 1 second she thought he might actually dismiss her the way powerful men dismiss rooms, with a look that suggests the conversation is over and you simply haven't caught up yet. Instead, quietly, "You should not be involved in this." The fire popped behind Nadia. She flinched so hard the spoon fell from her hand and clattered across the floorboards. Nobody moved. Wind pushed against the walls. Then Nadia bent to pick up the spoon before anyone could touch it. Her sleeve slipped. This time Nora saw the bruises clearly. Finger-shaped. Dark. High on the upper arm, in the place where a hand grabs when it means to hold. She straightened slowly. Lucien had already seen where she was looking. That was not me. Too fast. Too direct. The specificity of a man who has made this clarification before and hated having to. Nora believed him. She hated that she did. Lightning lit the windows blue-white. A heartbeat later, thunder moved through the mountain and shook the cabin hard enough to rattle every dish in the sink. Nadia dropped beneath the table. Lucien moved at the same instant, not toward Nora, not toward the door, toward the child. He crouched beside the table first, putting his shoulder between Nadia and the sharp wooden edge before she could hit it. "It's fine," he said, softer than anything else he'd said all night. Nadia stared at him from beneath a curtain of wet blonde hair, still frightened, still hiding, but for just a second, listening. He held out his hand. She didn't take it. He left it there anyway. The fire cracked. Snow hissed against the windows. The storm breathed. Then Nora crossed toward the wall phone beside the sink. Lucien rose instantly. "Don't. I'm calling Deputy Mercer." "No." The force behind the words stopped her hand inches from the receiver. She turned slowly. "Why?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice the way people do when they're telling you something they can't afford to say loudly. "Because if Mercer answers that call, this cabin becomes the first place they search." The room stilled. Nora studied his face carefully. The cuts, the exhaustion, the coat still dripping on her floor. Everything about him said power, and none of it looked safe, and still, she believed him. Again, against her better judgment. "You think the sheriff's department is involved. I think people with enough money stop asking permission." "That's not the same thing." "No." His eyes went to the window. "It usually ends worse." Nadia crawled out slowly from under the table. "Deputy Mercer came to the house last week." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He told Aunt Celeste the transfer papers were already waiting." Lucien's head turned. "They're sending me away." The wind hit the cabin like a fist. And across the frost-covered window glass, pale light moved. Once. Twice. Headlights. Too steady for lost travelers. Too deliberate for anything innocent. Nora pressed her palm against the condensation on the glass. 3 vehicles. Moving up the logging road in a line, slow and certain through the blizzard. Lucien was already moving. The man who had crouched gently beside a frightened child 30 seconds ago was gone. What replaced him moved faster, thought faster, grabbed his gloves from the table, crossed to the rifle above the stone mantel, and checked the chamber with the ease of someone who had done it enough times that it no longer registered as a choice. Metal snapped inside the cabin. Nadia folded inward at the sound. "Nora." He didn't look at her. "Kill the lamps." "You brought this here. Kill the lamps." A second set of headlights appeared on the lower road. Then a third. 3 vehicles. The engines were muffled by snow, but the vibrations still found the floorboards. Found the soles of her boots. "Those aren't county plows." "No." Nora turned down the oil lamps one by one. Shadows swallowed the walls. The fire became the only light left alive in the room. Outside, the vehicles kept climbing. Nadia backed toward the hallway. "Stay where I can see you." She stopped. Not because he raised his voice. She stopped before she thought to choose. The reflex of a child who has learned that hesitation costs more than obedience. Nora saw that. Filed it somewhere. Another piece fitting into place wrong. The first truck broke through the tree line. Black body. Reinforced grille. No county markings. Men visible through the windshield, broad-shouldered, dark jackets, rifles upright between their knees. Lucien said something under his breath. One word. Already. What are they? Nora whispered. He said nothing. The silence was the answer. Snow churned under tires as the lead truck jerked to a stop outside. Headlights bleached the windows white. Doors opened. 4 men spread across the property with the automatic precision of people who have done this before. One covering the tree line, one circling toward the generator shed, the spacing too clean for volunteers or deputies. Their jackets caught the light. A silver wolf crest, stitched near the shoulder, matching the one on Lucien's belt. You said people were looking for her, Nora said. You didn't say they worked for you. He chambered around. They don't work for me. Then a flashlight cut across the porch, and a voice she recognized moved through the storm. Lucien. Deputy Mercer. Nora's hand moved instinctively toward the wall phone before she remembered the deadline. Mercer knocked once. Heavy. Official. Open up. Lucien didn't move. Mercer waited. Then louder. You know how this ends. Lucien stepped toward the door. Nora grabbed his sleeve before she could stop herself. What are you doing? His eyes dropped to her hand, then moved to Nadia standing rigid by the hallway entrance. If they come inside, he said quietly, they won't leave empty-handed. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just certain. The way people are certain about things they've already watched happen. Another flashlight swept across the side windows. One of the men tested the generator shed door. Nadia. Mercer's voice through the wood. Your father's here to bring you home. Nadia's face drained. Lucien went completely still. Home. Not custody. Not transfer. Not protective care. Home. The wrong word. And the way Nadia's whole body reacted to it, the way she shrank inside herself like something trying to take up less space, told Nora everything about what that word actually meant in this context. You don't want this getting uglier than it already is, Mercer said. Lucien's mouth pulled at one corner. Not quite a smile. Something colder. Something that had stopped pretending to be a smile. Nora noticed then, through everything, through the shouting and the flashlights and Mercer's patience, that Lucien had never lowered the rifle. Not once. Not even close to the floor. He had arrived expecting this. Mercer rattled the doorknob. Last chance. Lucien raised the rifle. Nora's breath caught. You fire at a deputy. This changes everything. It changed before I got here. The porch boards creaked outside. Men repositioning. Snow ribboned under the door in thin white lines. Then a small hand closed around Nora's wrist. Hard enough to hurt. Nadia. Eyes locked on the rifle with open, animal terror. Not fear of Mercer. Fear of after. You can't let him give me back, she whispered. Mercer pounded the door again. Nadia flinched so hard her teeth clicked. And then, before Lucien could stop it, the words came out of her. You don't understand. Her voice cracked down the middle. His family is worse than the men outside. He didn't move after she said it. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe differently. Just absorb it. The way people absorb things they already know are true and have been paying for quietly for years. Outside, the storm worked against the cabin. Snow chains grinding on ice. A truck door slamming near the shed. Nadia shook her head before he could speak. No. Lucien turned toward her fully. And something crossed his face that wasn't authority. Wasn't control. A flash of damage, genuine and unmanaged, before it sank back under the surface. You said they wouldn't come tonight. The porch creaked. Mercer tried the knob again. Nora looked at Lucien's sleeve. Dried blood, dark against the cuff. A tear in the fabric near his shoulder that wasn't storm damage, the kind of tear that happens when something gets close. He had fought someone before reaching the cabin. Mercer again, through the door. "You're out of road, son." Lucien closed his eyes briefly at the word son. Then thunder. Real thunder. Not trucks. Cracked directly over the ridge and shook the chimney stones like a detonation. The reaction was instant. Lucien spun toward the windows with a rifle half-raised before the sound finished rolling through the mountains. Firelight lit his face sharp and white. His breathing changed, faster, controlled too tightly, the breathing of someone fighting to stay inside a room that their body was already trying to leave. Nadia dropped to the floor at the exact same sound. Not from the thunder. From him. The room went completely still. He lowered the rifle slowly. His jaw locked. The fire cracked. Wind pressed softly against the glass. Nora smelled cold air from the doorframe. Wet pine. Gun oil. Smoke. And beneath it all, copper. Blood. He noticed her watching. Without speaking, he stripped off the coat and dropped it over a chair. Snow scattered across the floor. Dark stains marked the inner lining near the ribs. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "That isn't nothing." He turned toward the window. Outside, one of Mercer's men circled the far wall, flashlight dragging slow white cuts across the cabin glass. Hunting for movement. Nadia moved toward Nora instead of her father. Nora saw him feel that happen, watched it move through him, quiet and precise, like a splinter going in. She grabbed the blanket from the rocking chair and wrapped it around Nadia's shoulders. The child leaned into the touch before she caught herself. Lucien watched from across the room. The fire moved between them. "Mercer, you know the council already signed the transfer order." Nadia went rigid. Lucien's face emptied. "Council. Not family court. Not child services. Council." The word had weight. Administrative weight. The weight of decisions made in rooms where children don't have names. Nora knelt beside Nadia slowly. "Who's trying to take you?" The girls stared at the floor. Lucien spoke first. "People stop seeing children once certain family names get involved." Mercer from outside. "We can do this legally or ugly." Lucien laughed once. No sound in it. Nora studied him in the firelight. Expensive watch still on his wrist. Swollen knuckles. Torn coat. Eyes that had not stopped moving over the windows since the moment he walked in. Everything about this man said power. Nothing about him felt safe. And yet, when Nadia shifted too close to the stove, Lucien moved. Automatically. No thought. His arm came up to block the sharp edge of the cast iron before she could graze it. He didn't even realize he'd done it. Nadia did. Her breathing settled, not fully, but enough. Like something small had been confirmed. Nora stood. What really happened to Nadia's mother? He went still. Not surprised. Stopped. Like someone who had been waiting for that question for a long time and still wasn't ready for it. The fire. The wind. Mercer's men moving in the dark. Seconds passed. You do not want that answer. He didn't look up. He kept staring into the fire. Nora stepped closer. Kept her voice low. You asked me not to call Mercer. You're telling me I don't want answers. What exactly do you want from me? I want you to understand that the second that door opens, this stops being your problem. That stopped being true when she walked in here half frozen. He looked toward Nadia. The child kept her eyes on the floor. And Nora watched him feel that too. Watched it hit him in the specific way that things hit people who have spent years watching someone they love turn away from them and understanding fully why. Thunder again. Lower this time. Distant. His shoulders tensed before the sound arrived. Not surprise. Memory. His hand moved toward the scar at his ribs, then stopped. Caught himself. Let his hand fall. Nora pretended not to see it. Finally, quietly, almost like he couldn't help it once the word started. "There's a bridge south of Greyhaven, near Bitter Creek." Nadia looked up slowly. Nadia's mother crossed it 6 months ago. Storm almost identical to this one. Road ice. Guardrail failure. Vehicle went over the side. He paused. The sheriff's report called it an accident before the tow trucks reached the river. The cabin went small. Mercer's men moved like shadows beyond the walls. "What did she find?" Nora asked. "Land agreements." "Whose land?" He gave a short, dry sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Depends which version you read." Lightning washed the room white. In the sudden brightness, Nora saw Nadia watching her father. Not with anger. With the careful attention of someone putting together a story they were only given pieces of. Families around Greyhaven signed timber contracts they couldn't read properly. Property lines shifted afterward. Water access disappeared. Whole parcels transferred through holding companies tied to the council. Nora felt the cold in her stomach. Everybody in Greyhaven knew stories like that. Nobody said them at full volume. She found proof. Copies. Signatures. Payments through shell accounts. And then her car went off a bridge. The silence after that was the heaviest thing in the room. Lucien rubbed a hand across his mouth. "I told myself keeping quiet kept Nadia alive." Nadia's breathing changed. Lucien looked at her. "Too late. You said Mommy lost control of the car." Nobody answered. One of the trucks outside revved harder. Snow chains grinding. Nadia stood up too fast, blanket sliding from her shoulders to the floor. "You lied. Nadia. You said it was weather." "Nadia, So you stayed with them?" That one landed. Nora watched it land. Watched the thing that happened to Lucien Voss when a 9-year-old girl asked the exact right question in the exact right way. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Nadia backed toward the hallway wall, shoulders pressing into the wood. The cabin felt suddenly airless. Not cowardice, Nora thought. Delay. He saw the danger early. He waited. And while he waited, someone else crossed a bridge in a storm and didn't come home. Mercer's voice through the loudspeaker outside cracked the moment open. "We already have signed authorization from Child Services. Transfer paperwork carries Lucien Voss's signature and legal consent." Nadia's eyes locked on her father's face. And Lucien Voss, who had not looked surprised by a single thing since walking through the door, looked surprised. He hadn't known. The paperwork was forged. And now, from across the room, the person he had stayed quiet to protect was looking at him, like she no longer recognized his face. "You signed it." Nadia's voice barely existed. "No." Immediate. Certain. The damage was already done. Nadia wrapped her arms around herself, made herself smaller. She looked younger now than when Nora had found her on the road, barefoot in the sleet, fingers white, moving like something that had forgotten how to ask for help. The loudspeaker again. "We can settle this quietly, Lucien." Mercer's patience was the most dangerous thing about him. Nora moved to the window and parted the curtain with 2 fingers. 3 trucks angled along the ridge road. Men moving between them, rifles beneath storm coats, silver wolf crests on their shoulders. Not deputies. Employees. That crest was on half the buildings in Greyhaven. Paychecks. Fuel trucks. School donation plaques. Winter supply drives. The Voss operations kept the mountain alive through January and February, and everybody understood, without needing to say it plainly, which names you didn't question, and which problems got quietly buried before spring. Behind her, Lucien unloaded the rifle onto the kitchen table. Bullets clicked against the wood grain one by one. "You think they forged your signature?" "I know they did." No outrage in it. Just recognition. The flat recognition of a man who has finally seen the shape of something he spent years pretending had a different shape. My grandfather built most of Greyhaven's mills after the mine closures. The council owns timber rights, freight routes, equipment leases. He pressed both hands against the table edge. If the contracts Nadia's mother found go public, families lose jobs before the news cycle ends. Stores close. Mortgage loans collapse. Nora felt anger rise first, then something she liked less. Understanding. Not forgiveness. Never that. But understanding the architecture of the trap. The way something monstrous can sustain itself by becoming structural, by making its own destruction look like everyone's destruction. Do you think this town wants the truth badly enough to starve for it? The question sat there. Ugly, because neither answer was clean. Nora thought about the lodge payments due after winter. Tourists already canceling. Supply costs rising since the rail line closed. Then she looked at Nadia. A child wrapped in a borrowed blanket while armed men waited outside with forged paperwork. No one spoke. Then Nadia quietly moved toward the hallway. I didn't tell them where. Lucien's head came up. She stopped near the doorway. Still wouldn't look directly at him. What didn't you tell them? Nora asked. Nadia swallowed. I found copies. Before I ran. The cabin went very still. Mom hid them under the floor in the lake cabin, inside a blue file bag. Her breathing shook. She told me if anyone came asking questions, I wasn't supposed to trust anyone from the council. Lucien closed his eyes. How long have you known? Nadia said nothing. That was the answer. Nora heard Mercer outside, issuing instructions through the wind. A truck inching closer toward the porch, tires grinding through compacted snow. If they think those documents still exist, Lucien said, they won't stop. Nadia lifted her head. I moved them. After the bridge. Lucien moved toward her immediately. Where? She hesitated. Not defiant. Just terrified of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person again. The loudspeaker. Road crews just confirmed the South Pass is closing. The trucks idle closer. Snow banked higher against the porch rails. I went back last week. Barely audible. The file bag's gone. Those 4 words hollowed the room. When? She flinched at the sharpness. Last week. I checked after school. You went there alone? A single nod. Lucien turned away and gripped the kitchen counter hard. The muscles in his forearm moved beneath the skin. He stood there calculating, roads closing, Mercer outside, documents missing, someone else possibly already holding the only leverage they had. Then a new sound cut through the storm. A siren. Distant. Growing. Mercer's loudspeaker clicked off. Everyone went still. The engine labored carefully through deep snow before stopping somewhere below the mountain road curve. Doors opened. Voices, faint, urgent, moved through the wind. Lucien reached the window. Nora got there first. A Montana State Trooper vehicle crawled through the blizzard at the bottom of the ridge, chains biting ice. A second SUV followed. Helena plates. Not local. Mercer stepped out from his truck immediately, shoulders already wrong. The trooper climbed out wearing reflective winter gear, caked with snow. Tall. Broad. Dark knit cap. He lifted a flashlight toward the cabin porch. Nora recognized him before she had his name. Elias Reed. 3 winters ago. Her brother. A cardiac seizure on Route 16 outside Greyhaven. Reed stayed on the line with emergency dispatch for 40 straight minutes while she drove through black ice toward a hospital she wouldn't reach in time. Her brother died. Reed never hung up. She had never forgotten a voice like that. Outside, Reed and Mercer exchanged words near the trucks, swallowed mostly by wind, but she caught fragments. Unauthorized radio blackout. Protective retrieval. State oversight. Mercer sounded irritated. For the first time all night, he sounded like a man who hadn't controlled something. Lucien grabbed his coat. We move before sunrise. In this storm, if the South Pass closes, we lose the mountain. And go where? He didn't answer. That silence told her enough. There was no safe destination anymore. There was only moving. Reed started toward the cabin with another trooper beside him. Younger, lean, gray beard under frost-covered collar. Nora watched the second man. Something about him felt immediately quietly wrong. Not obvious. Controlled. The specific wrongness of someone performing a thing they've practiced. He paused near Mercer before following Reed toward the porch. Mercer leaned close, murmured something directly into his ear. The second trooper gave the smallest nod. Almost invisible. Nora saw it. The porch steps creaked under boots. Lucien slid the rifle quietly beneath the table. Not surrender. Concealment. Another calculation inside a night full of them. A hard knock. Stay patrol. Open up. Nora moved first. Lucien caught her wrist. They looked at each other. He wasn't stopping her. He was deciding whether opening the door killed them faster than keeping. It closed. Mr. Voss, Reed said through the wood. I know you're inside. Nora pulled her wrist free gently and opened the door halfway against the wind. Freezing air. Diesel fumes. Wet wool. Reed stepped inside and removed one glove. Recognition moved across his face. Nora Hale. She nodded once. The second trooper entered behind him and quietly closed the door. His eyes moved around the cabin with the methodical sweep of someone counting exits. Counting people. Then his jacket shifted when he reached for his collar. A small silver crest. Pinned beneath the inner flap. Voss timber insignia. Hidden. Not official issue. Cold moved through Nora's chest and didn't leave. Reed saw Nadia near the stove and softened. We need immediate protective transport before road closure. No transport is safe, Lucien said. The second trooper watched Lucien without blinking. Then Nora realized, in the same moment everyone else did, that Nadia was no longer beside the stove. The blanket lay empty on the floor. Nadia? No answer. The cabin erupted. Hallway, bathroom, storage room. Everyone moving at once through the dark. Nora's pulse hammered hard enough to hurt. Then the bedroom door at the end of the hallway creaked open slowly. Nadia stepped out, holding a blue waterproof file bag against her chest. Both hands. Steady. The room went completely still. Outside, Mercer saw it through the window. His expression changed immediately. Nadia looked at her father first, then at Nora, then at the armed men waiting beyond the glass. Her voice came out barely above a breath. I'll go with them. The room held its breath. She gripped the bag tighter. If people stopped dying, cold dawn light came in thin gray bands over the Montana fields. Frost on the fence wire. Cattle shifting somewhere in the dark beyond the tree line. The trooper's flashlight cutting across the porch, just as Mercer's SUV door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Nadia stood barefoot near the kitchen doorway wrapped in Lucien's jacket, her fingers locked around Nora's wrist. Mercer stepped forward before the trooper reached the porch steps. County matter. Family extraction authorized under emergency. Funny, Reed said. County dispatch never mentioned a convoy. The flashlight swept across the vehicles. The armed men near the barn who were pretending not to reach for their weapons. Then it found Nadia. She flinched before the beam, even touched her face. Lucien saw it happen, watched the terror move through her, and watched Mercer notice it too. Mercer smiled. The smallest, most careful smile. There's a custody order pending, he said. The child needs to come with us. No, Nadia whispered. He ignored her. The practiced ease of a man who has been ignoring that particular kind of voice for his entire career. Reed looked at him. You got paperwork? 1 second too long. That single beat of hesitation tore something open in the silence, because everyone on that porch understood the same thing at the same moment. There was no custody order, no protective transfer, no legal extraction, just removal. Nora's voice came out thin but level. You said federal review. Circumstances changed. You said she'd be protected. She will be. He couldn't hold her eyes. Wind pressed against the porch screens. Lucien watched Nadia backing toward the kitchen doorway.
Slow.
Careful. The way something moves when it's trying not to trigger the thing watching it. Mercer saw it too. Bring the girl outside. Nobody moved. Then Nora stepped forward. You lied. Mercer's jaw tightened. Careful, Nora. You were never taking her into protection. Stand down. She was evidence. One slow step toward the porch. You have absolutely no idea what you're standing in front of. Nora laughed once.
Broken. Hollow.
I know exactly what it is now. She looked at Lucien, at Nadia, at Reed, and Lucien saw it happen, the internal crossing of a line she would not come back from. Not after tonight. Not after all of it. Mercer's voice dropped. The Voss Council owns judges in 3 counties. Shipping routes. Rail contracts. Half the cattle export permits in western Montana. You think standing on this porch changes anything? No, Nora said. She reached into her coat pocket. Mercer froze. Lucien froze. She pulled out a small silver flash drive. Tiny. Almost weightless. Mercer went pale. I copied everything. Silence. Complete silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. I sent duplicates before you arrived. Lucien stared at her. She had never told him. Had never even suggested it. What files? The trooper asked. Mercer said quietly, take her. Then everything came apart at once. Deputies surging. Nadia screaming. Lucien hitting Mercer before thought could stop it. The collision driving both men into the railing hard enough to splinter wood. Mercer grunting as he went into the porch post. The trooper shouting. A deputy grabbing for Nadia. Nora throwing herself between them. Don't touch her, with a force that surprised everyone, including her. Another deputy reaching for Nora's arm. Everybody back. The trooper's voice cracked across the farm like something breaking. Nobody fully obeyed. Mercer drove an elbow into Lucien's ribs. Pain detonated through his chest. He barely felt it. Months, years of restraint finally ripped open all at once. The council, the prison years, the dead witnesses. Nadia shaking in motel bathrooms. Nadia crying silently at night because she thought no one could hear. Mercer's hand moved for his pistol. Lucien saw it and lost control completely. He drove Mercer face first into the porch floorboards. Blood hit the wood. A deputy lunged. Reed intercepted him violently, slamming him into the railing. Drop it. Drop the weapon. Nadia was crying. Small sounds. The kind that come out when someone has used up everything else. Nora held her against her chest with both arms, kneeling on the porch, shielding her from the chaos erupting around them while the sun came up and painted the frost fields gold. Beautiful.
Silent. Wrong.
Lucien pinned Mercer down with one forearm across his throat. Mercer coughed, spat blood, and then laughed. Actually laughed. You think this saves her? You already buried her the second those files surfaced. The words hit harder than anything physical, because Lucien knew he meant them.
School.
Friends. Birthdays. Any future where Nadia got to become ordinary, where she got to simply grow up without this weight on her. Gone. Already gone. Reed dragged Lucien backward by force. Enough. Lucien stumbled away, hands slick, breathing ragged. Mercer looked up at Nora with naked, specific hatred. You just destroyed yourself. Nora's face was white. She didn't look away. Maybe. A second cruiser appeared at the end of the dirt road. Then another. Then a third. Reed looked toward them, something settling heavily into his expression. This was bigger than county corruption. Everyone on the porch could feel the scale of it shifting. Mercer felt it too. Uncertainty entered his eyes. For the first time, real uncertainty, as one of his deputies started quietly backing toward the SUVs. "Nobody leaves," Reed said. Mercer wiped blood from his mouth, looked at Lucien, at Nora, at Nadia, curled against Nora's side, too small for everything that had happened around her tonight. When he spoke, his voice had gone calm again, almost kind. "The Voss Council will come for every single person standing on this property." The sirens kept growing louder, and nobody doubted him. The cabin smelled like smoke, wet wool, and burnt coffee by the time the sun fully cleared the mountains. Nadia slept beside the stone fire pit wrapped in 2 blankets, Lucien's jacket folded under her cheek. The firelight moved softly across her face. Her breathing was even. No panic in it. No flinching at sounds. Just sleep. Nora sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, a mug of coffee cooling untouched between her palms. Her hair still tangled from the farm. Dried blood on one sleeve she kept forgetting about. Lucien stood at the frost-clouded window watching Greyhaven wake below the ridge. Pickup trucks. The gas station opening. Smoke from chimneys. Normal life continuing. While underneath it, something spread the way groundwater spreads through every crack, every foundation, invisible until it wasn't. He could almost hear the town already. Federal vehicles. Deputies detained. The Voss name passing quietly over diner counters and hardware store aisles. People pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. "They'll know it was me before noon," Nora said. "Yes. My firm will cut ties." "Yes. The council will freeze the accounts." A brief pause. "Yes." She gave a small, hollow sound, not quite a laugh. Just the noise of someone too tired to maintain the pretense that this was survivable. Silence settled. The fire breathed. A crow landed on the porch railing outside with a rough scrape of claws. Lucien turned toward her. "You should leave before this spreads further." Nora studied him. "And do what? You still have options." "No," she said quietly. "I had options yesterday." No argument. Neither of them. Nadia shifted in her sleep. Both of them looked at her at the exact same moment, and something changed in the room. Unspoken. Not romantic. Something heavier and more permanent. The intimacy that forms between people who have watched the same terrible thing happen and stayed standing. Shared ruin. Lucien lowered himself into the chair across from Nora. Every muscle in his body reminded him of the last 12 hours. His knuckles were swollen. There was blood beneath his fingernails that wasn't entirely his. "You stopped him," Nora said. "For now. That matters." Lucien looked at Nadia. "I don't know what protecting her means anymore." His voice came out rougher than he expected. "I spent years believing violence solved problems. It's how the Voss structure works. Eliminate threats, control fear, bury witnesses. But now, every time I fight back, she loses more." The fire cracked between them. She can't go back to school. Can't go home. Can't exist quietly anymore. Nora kept her eyes on the coffee. There was nothing merciful left to say. So neither of them said anything. The phone on the table vibrated. Lucien reached for it immediately. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Static. Then a voice, low, urgent, familiar. "Federal teams hit 2 storage sites this morning." A pause. Too late. Lucien's expression flattened into something unreadable. Nora watched him from across the fire. "What happened?" The phone stayed in his hand long after the call ended. The fire had burned low. The cabin had cooled around its edges. Wind brushed the windows. Somewhere down in Greyhaven, federal vehicles moved through town in the thin morning light. Nora watched Lucien from across the room without speaking. He looked older now, not physically, like something internal had finally stopped holding its shape. Nadia still slept beside the fire with one hand curled inside the sleeve of his jacket, the cuff hanging over her fingers, almost covering them. Nora couldn't stop looking at that. She found herself remembering, without meaning to, the roadside diner outside Helena. Nadia rigid in the booth under fluorescent lights, refusing to touch the food until Lucien slid his plate toward her first. That had been the beginning. Not the farmhouse. Not the files. Not Mercer. That moment. Because the dangerous part, she understood this now completely, had never been the blood or the council or the storm moving toward Blackwater Ridge. It was feeding her. You feed a starving child once, and they start looking for you afterward. Not because they trust you, because they remember surviving beside you. And you start looking for them too. Lucien set down the phone. They're locking down county records. Nora nodded once. Neither of them asked if it would matter. The answer already lived in the room. Nadia stirred, eyes opening halfway, unfocused, disoriented. For one fragile second, fear crossed her face. Then she saw Lucien near the window, Nora beside the fire. The fear didn't vanish. It just lowered enough for breathing. She pushed herself upright slowly, rubbing at her eyes with the hanging sleeve. Outside, distant sirens drifted faintly through Greyhaven again. Nadia listened, then looked at Nora. Are they staying? Nora glanced toward the window. Federal sedans. Black SUVs. Reporters gathering at the lower roads. Pieces moving into a configuration that would never look like anonymity again. Yes. Nadia absorbed that quietly. Then she looked at Lucien. Are we leaving? The question hung there. Simple. Completely simple. And heavy enough to change the air pressure in the room. No gunfire. No deputies. No headlights through the dark. Just exhaustion. And truth. And a 9-year-old girl asking whether she still had a wee. Lucien walked back toward the fire slowly, crouched beside her with movements that were careful in a way that didn't come naturally to him, like he was relearning something. I should. Nadia's face changed. Instantly. The smallest change imaginable. A kind of careful, practiced going still that children develop when they've learned that showing disappointment has consequences.
Oh.
No tears. That made it worse. Lucien looked at the floor beside her. His hand rested there, close enough to reach, not close enough to assume. I said should. Nadia looked up slowly. The firelight moved across his face, the scars near his jaw, the bruising under one eye, the exhaustion that had settled in so deep it was structural now. He looked uncertain in a way that nothing in his life had ever prepared him for. Nadia hesitated. Could this place become real someday? The cabin held that question. The wind. The fire. The muted sound of Greyhaven waking beneath the ridge. Nora felt it settle into her chest like something taking root. Not hiding. Not surviving. Home. Lucien looked toward the frost at the corners of the window glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost lost beneath the fire. I don't know. Honest. Nothing more merciful than that. Nora lowered her eyes. Because ordinary life was already gone. For all of them. The council took it first. The rest they surrendered themselves. Willingly, knowingly, with their eyes open. Outside, another convoy moved slowly through Greyhaven toward the courthouse. Lucien watched the headlights disappear beyond the trees. Then, after a long silence, very quietly, the worst one still hasn't shown himself yet. Nobody asked who he meant. The fire kept burning anyway. Somewhere beyond Blackwater Ridge, the machine was still running. Witnesses disappearing. Financial records dissolving. Assets moving quietly through holding companies in the dark. Not defeated. Reorganizing. And somewhere inside that machine, a name that hadn't surfaced yet, a name that even Lucien Voss lowered his voice around, was already watching the ridge. Waiting. Thanks for watching. If this story drew you in, don't stop here. Your next chapter is already waiting. Tap the thumbnail on your screen and keep the journey alive. And if you felt even a moment of it, the tension, the betrayal, the pull of something deeper, don't just disappear. Leave a like. Drop a comment. Let your voice echo inside Royal Crown Diaries. Because every reaction, every word, every click keeps these stories breathing.